The fact that competitors and state-sponsored folks are coming in and taking our technology, they've been doing that for over 3 decades now. Data is power, and that's what most of the attackers are doing. So I think what companies are kind of blind to is the fact that having access to your internal data is gold.
This is Code and Country with host Ian L. Patterson.
So welcome to Code and Country, where we explore the intersection of cybersecurity, national security, and geopolitics. Today, we're joined by Andrew Amaro, founder of Klavan Security. Andrew spent over a decade with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, aka CSIS, where he led technical operations in counterterrorism and in the cyber domain. Now, in the private sector, he helps early-stage companies to leverage security as an enabler to help with business growth. Andrew, good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So maybe just to start off, could you share your journey from military service and your time at CSIS to co-founding Klavan?
Thank you for listening to Code and Country, sponsored by Plurilock. If you're enjoying this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, or follow the podcast. And now, back to the episode.
Sure. So the security journey, I guess, actually goes even further back than just the military. When I was younger, I used to skateboard a lot, still skateboard. And I found that I was, trying to find different places to go in and break into them to find those secret spots. So there was a bit of dodging of the security guards, a bit of dodging of, the police officers and things like that. A bit of that, kind of trying to dodge the authority a bit. So that was where I kind of, was spotting things on how to break into places and things like that. And luckily, there was an opportunity at a very young age to do a bit of military service. And actually, that was a great place to start honing in on the security skills, but for good. And so after the military, I did my engineering. I got my engineering degree and then joined CSIS. And that's where I started on the side of, you call it like the tech ops side, but more the physical side. And so that was super interesting. I had a great mentor, still talk to him this day, and a lot of really cool stories from back in the day. Things that, no one else in the world, or a very small portion of the people in the world, would ever get to do. So that was really cool. And as every, secret service type of thing, there's always silos. So I'm very curious, as I said before. So I was always knocking on doors and looking at what other people were doing around. And I kind of stumbled upon this online assets group that was doing kind of the pre-cyber stuff. And I just latched on because I saw a lot of similar things that we can do in cyber world or the digital world that we did in the physical world. So I wanted to port that over. And so I did. And that's where I gained a lot of experience on the cyber side. Then I moved up to one of the regions, which where I ran a technical team in technical ops. And that was a lot of really cool experience. We were directly supporting investigations, national security investigations. And I always say that the tech ops folks are the guys that are crawling through the attics, digging the tunnels, and have to get the tetanus shots because that's what was there. So
that's awesome. Okay, well, I want to dig into a bunch of that. So maybe the first question though is, when I think of CSIS, I think of intelligence officers, James Bond, traditional espionage. But it sounds like that's not what you were working on. So maybe how does what you did compare or differ from that mental image of a traditional intelligence officer?
Yeah, so that's a great question because typically you're thinking, the spies, James Bond, and so on. So the best way, because we're using James Bond, is I would think of myself and my team, for example, being Q. So James Bond goes down to the layer and gets all of the cool tools. And we would be the ones that would be designing, building, testing those tools, and then providing it to the intelligence officers. We also do a lot of the, installations as well. So going into facilities, going into residents and things like that, we would be the ones doing it. The intelligence officers are more focused on the people building those networks and getting that type of information. We will be the ones that are actually in the people's homes or in the facilities and that type of thing. So that's kind of a bit of a difference. More technology powered. Yeah.
Yeah. What prompted then the shift from doing that for the government and then transitioning into the private sector?
So when I was at CSIS, I actually started a lot of national programs, and I got to visit all the regions, and so I headed off a bunch of those programs, and it was exciting, but I wanted a bit more. I started chatting with a few folks from the outside, from the private world, and I noticed that a lot of startups were essentially drowning in compliance tasks and missing some basic foundational security. And the same thing went for a lot of other types of companies. So I wanted to be able to bring the knowledge that I had collected over the decade and apply it to the real world on the outside of the shadows and the secrets, and be able to give that kind of security to everyone. And so the idea of Klavan was to make it more accessible and use security and compliance as a business accelerator, and not really a bureaucratic drag type of thing.
So I'm super curious because coming from an intelligence organization, I have to imagine that the visibility that you had to the threat or to multiple threats was probably significant. What do you think that organizations, and I'll say organizations, but really I mean businesses, government agencies, etc. What do you think that they're perhaps blind to or not seeing that they really ought to see?
Yeah, so organizations as a whole, I mean, they typically focus on one thing at a time, and I think that just, majority of people do that too, but organizations do that as well, and it all has to do with budgets and programs and projects that they have, and potentially their clients. But they kind of keep chasing one thing. So now cybersecurity is what most of them should be looking at, and they're looking at that, but they're also forgetting the physical side. They're also ignoring insider threats and the fact that competitors and state-sponsored folks are coming in and taking our technology. They've been doing that for over 3 decades now, and I think that part is kind of what they're ignoring the most. Um, Most of the times they will say that, I don't. Why would they ever be interested in us? Why would they ever be interested in taking anything from us? Why would anyone ever do that? And we've seen over the years that, data is power, and that's what most of the attackers are doing. So I think what companies are kind of blind to is the fact that having access to your internal data is gold, and that's it. It doesn't have to be fancied. It's not part of a movie. It's not part of an entire huge, storyline. It's the simple fact that if someone comes and joins your company, the fact that they're there, they're collecting your data, and that should be something you're worried about.
Well, I think we saw a little bit of that recently. I mean, so as we're recording this, news has just recently broken around Coinbase being held for ransom for $20 million. And I think kudos to the Coinbase executive team who said, well, let's just spend $20 million going after the bad guys because we were potentially going to have to spend this money anyway. Let's maybe make sure that's it's a good use of proceeds. The interesting thing, based on the public reporting anyway that's available right now, is exactly to your point. They were insiders who were bribed initially to divulge data information. And that's how the bad guys got in. I'm curious also. I mean, you started off talking about the physical world as a skateboarder and looking at access from a physical lens. And then also you were just mentioning about crossing borders, which is a little bit more topical now in 2025 than maybe it was a couple of years ago. What are some of the other areas that organizations or businesses should be thinking about in regards to cyber threats, but cyber threats that maybe come from a physical jump off point, or come from the fact that there's still a physical world, even though that there's a cyber world out there?
The one thing that comes to mind is putting your cyber, let's say your SOC, and your actual physical security group in the same room, on the same floor, having them talk to each other. Right now, a lot of facilities still have your cyber security folks with your IT folks, and your, facilities management running the security with probably an external security guard company doing some of the monitoring. Um, all that needs to be together. And why? Because it's all security, right? And a lot of the attacks could be actually started from a physical approach or an attack vector and then launched externally. So with the insider threats, for example, you need to egress the data. So you can have somebody go in and plug something in and then open up something for the attackers externally to run their operation. So there's many places like utilities and critical infrastructure where that has to be done, where you have your SOC and your other security together all the time. And those things, you can correlate the different activities based on, time of the activity plus other activity that's going on potentially on your digital network as well as your computers. So all of that can be correlated and give you some sort of context as to who was involved and what happened. And so all of the footage, all the video footage that you have, for example, now can actually tell you a story versus saying the IT team actually finding something on the digital side and treating that as an isolated event, and the physical side treating that as an isolated event, where in fact it's an actual team and it's actually an operation.
It's interesting. I mean, I think about the customers that we serve today. The vast majority of them have their physical security and their cyber security or digital security in two completely different parts of the organizational structure. So they roll up to different parts of the organization. There's not a single stakeholder who's responsible for everything. The CISO typically kind of rolls up to the CIO, whereas the head of physical security, in some cases might roll up to HR. And you're right. The bad guys don't necessarily have that same distinction. They can go after either to accomplish their objective. And so it seems like it's I'll actually say only in a handful of much more mature organizations have I seen a chief security officer with both physical and cyber responsibilities. And that's the exception. That's not the norm.
Definitely.
How would you think about maybe working towards some kind of change? So if you had an organization where those roles were bifurcated, and the CISO and the person responsible for physical security were in different parts of the organizational structure, what are some things that organizations could do to mitigate that organizational problem?
So so the one thing, it would have to start from the top. So definitely the board, the CEO, and everyone on top would have to admit that security is important. And the reason I say that is that you still see a lot of CISOs reporting to CTOs or not directly at the table when decisions are made. So to me, it just says that security is not important, and it's not something that we're going to do. We're just going to do it because we have to comply with some sort of regulation. What I'd like to see is that, the CSO, for example, would include IT, cybersecurity, and then physical security as well. But have the CSO at the table with everybody, the CFO, the CEO. And so that way, it would mean that whatever he or she has to say is important, and it's actually being taken into consideration when you're doing, business decisions. It's no longer that we're begging for budgets because it's a cost center, and if you're lucky, then you get like a portion of what you asked for. So I'd say the biggest thing is to bring that CSO to the table and allow him or her to be able to speak on the issues and the risks and things that they, if they don't address, might have a massive negative impact on the company. And that way you can also have them actually speak up when there's, business decisions being made, bringing in new technologies and so on. They can actually come up with a safe deployment strategy. They can, think about what impact it'll have on the current technology that you have. It'll have, a variety of different things. I mean, what comes to mind now is, let's say, AI. If you want to integrate AI into your organization, how do you do it safely, right? And having someone at the table immediately before everyone talks about budgets and how much more sales they're going to get and how cool it's going to be, and having it like secondhand having the CSO at the table and being able to have that data, firsthand, I think that would be perfect and would be super helpful. Because
So it sounds
then,
like collaboration. Collaboration is really the theme.
yeah, and I know it sounds kind of lame, but let's all collaborate. We need to collaborate. But yeah, it is. It's more collaboration. It's like if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, then what's going to happen?
Would love your thoughts around collaboration between different organizations as well. So one of the things that I'm super fascinated by is presumably when you were at CSIS, you had the entire government apparatus. You were collaborating back and forth. But as a when you're working with a private company, you don't necessarily have that. So how do you see the collaboration or intelligence sharing? How do you see it happening today between organizations, between private organizations, government agencies, vendors who you were talking about outsourcing security guards, so like other vendors?
Mhm.
How are you seeing that collaboration occurring today, and where would you like to see it in the future?
On the government side, there are channels for collaboration. I would say that they're not used in the most efficient manner that they could be. There's definitely some work that could be done there in sharing a lot of information. The issue is that shooting the messenger, kind of like ancient Greece, still exists. So a lot of the sharing of information is done very cautiously, and so that kind of impedes that channel of having a free flow of information between government agencies. On the private side, it's similar, but less for political reasons and more for competitiveness, right? And having the upper hand. So there's definitely a limitation there. There's a lot of groups that are, let's say, um, they're not for profit and they're organizations that share the information and broadcast it out. They might have private industry feed it to them and then they broadcast it out to others. What I'd like to see is more of an open sharing of experiences, of information that they might have from attackers or ransomware experiences, to going from business to business. I know CISA does a great job at putting out a lot of information, and I know they're in the US, but I use them frequently. I attend a lot of their calls, and they do a really good job at sharing what information they've gathered from their associates and advisors. So I think having more of that will be great, and I think that's the only way that we're going to keep up with the external attackers because they're constantly evolving. And the reason I say that is that they're evolving because they have a lot of motivation, be it from money or be it from other types of motivators. Um, on the defense side, we don't have the same motivation to defend ourselves that way. And we don't have the resources to think of every single spot that we're going to try to defend. So the only way to do that is to gather as much information from what others have seen and be aware of that. So as the more that we're aware, the better prepared we'll be, and hopefully less people fall for the same tricks.
I'm curious when you were doing the technical operations, wearing your government hat. I mean, how much of to the extent that you're able to share, how much of your success came from super sneaky, sophisticated gadgetry? I was thinking about Q that you were giving the example of earlier, versus plain old human nature that sometimes people just say things that they shouldn't.
Yeah. So like on our side, it was a lot based on technology, but I did say to my team, I'm like, go to all the meetings, the debriefs, and the briefings, and so on, and actually listen for what information they want, and don't just think of a solution or like not a solution, of a piece of tech that will give them that. Think of other things, other places that they could get that information. And yeah, a lot of the times it could just be, going to the same gym as the person, or, going for coffee at the same time as a person, or catching a flight with the person and sitting beside them. Um, yeah, a lot of the times the best way of doing or getting information is just talking to people, and just, listening to them talk to others. That's as simple as it is. The other things too, there's tons of data that's out there on social media. I think people overshare, companies overshare. It's gotten, I feel, a lot better. For one, back in the day, social media sites didn't have almost any protections. And then, after a decade or so, they started doing different things to protect, or supposedly protect, the users, but they're collecting the data for themselves. But people from the outside aren't able to access that data anymore.
So maybe double click on that. I mean, being careful around what you share on social media. Certainly, we've heard that for 20 years.
Yes.
But maybe can you give me an example? Like, if somebody's on LinkedIn, which is more of a business network as opposed to a personal one, and they're sharing that they're going to be attending a conference, or maybe they're sharing that they're at a conference. And I may or may not be talking about myself in this example. So, given that type of data that's out there, like if you put on your attacker's hat for a second, how would you leverage that?
Yeah. So let's say if you post something that you're going to be at a conference and you do it beforehand, for example, I'd probably find out, let's say if you live by yourself, I would potentially find out if you live by yourself, who else has keys, and that would be a good time to go into your home. The typical thing where, don't post that you're going on a trip or a family vacation because the burglar is going to come and break into your house. But that would be an opportunity where you're also going to be in transition. So there's a lot of places for interaction with you and I. So I could show up at the airport right before your flight and, strike up a conversation, or sit beside you at Big Rig and, share a pint or something. And maybe I might sit with you on the plane, or, let's cut all of that out. I'm going to be at the same conference as you. I'm going to have something to talk to you about. You're going to be at that conference. We have something in common. We're kind of both vetted to be there. So we're both comfortable talking to each other. It's supposed to be a networking type of conference, so why not? So there's tons of opportunities for that. The fact that you're posting it online might give it ideas. Now, there has to be a balance between, let's say, I also post that I'm going to be at conferences. I used to be a lot more cautious. I used to post it after I came back. I used to post pictures after I came back and so on. But there's definitely a balance when you're, public facing, that you have to kind of do that. So then you kind of have to rely on operational security when you're at conferences, and, trying not to say too much to this random guy that just shows up and wants to, have a bite of your burger kind of thing. It's like, that's kind of the balance. When I was with the service, I was non-existent online. Now I'm online, and there's a lot of information out there. So because you have a lot of information out there, then you can't just trust anyone that you just meet. There always has to be a bit of more of a vetting of a gut feel, and don't overshare. And a lot of the times I've heard that, going to conferences for organizations and getting a super, intelligent person to just start talking to you about their project and what they've done with the company, they're just going to tell you everything that they've done, all the IP, like all the tricks, because you're so excited. They're excited. They're proud of it. And it's probably one of the best ways to get IP without, bugging the place or ripping off any files. You just talk to the person.
Well, Andrew, you've just described a lot of what sales is all about, for better or worse.
It is. Yep. 100%. And there's a lot of parallels with, let's say, the corporate world and the roles that we play. Let's say for sales and so on. A lot of the talking, reading people and so on, you can say you're kind of spying. You're kind of trying to profile someone so that you can essentially target them better. And there's a lot of, definitely a lot of parallels for sure. Yeah.
Does your past experience working in an intelligence agency, have you felt like that has helped you in a private sector sales capacity?
I wish it helped me more. I feel like I was hiding behind a keyboard for most of my career, or like crawling through places. So my kind of face-to-face kind of interactions, that wasn't my thing. That was more of the intelligence officer's thing. So I wish it did a lot. I do have like a massive appreciation for sales folks now, because trying to run my own business and doing like the business growth and stuff. I don't know how the sales folks do it. Like, my hat's off to them. It is amazing. And because it is hard, and it's not for everyone. So I would say that it didn't help me in that sense. It did help me in other areas, but in the sales side, because I wasn't part of my role, Yeah.
So maybe a better example would be, if you were allowed to bug your competitor's place, then yeah, your former skills would have come in more handy.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah.
You mentioned something there about the transition from the dark to the light. This is something I've always been curious about: is people who started, no presence online, no LinkedIn, no Facebook, no Twitter, etc.
Mhm.
I'm probably aging myself right now because I didn't mention Snapchat or whatever the kids are using. Um, what was that transition like of first the decision to go from basically having no presence online to starting to put a presence out there and start to share some of you? Like, was that something that you were ready for? Like, is it exhausting being completely dark, or is it a comfort blanket that not having any information online gives you? And does it create anxiety when you go from dark to light? Like, I'm just super curious about that transition for you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's definitely a lot easier to think about not having anything around. Um, but it was also it was quite isolating when it came to your professional career, because you only exist kind of within the service, and you don't exist anywhere else. So the future and opportunities and stuff, you're kind of not doing yourself any favors for not networking and keeping contact with a lot more people outside of the industry. The other thing too that I also felt like we lacked a lot because we weren't online was that whole collaboration piece of getting fresher and newer information from others and opening that up to private industry and so on. I think because we're not online, we're missing out on that as well. So um but it was a lot easier to manage because I just wasn't on there. But on the other side too, I can tell if someone's working for the service or not, or working for the government, and they don't want to share anything because their profile is very limited, their presence online is very limited, and that's usually a tell. So my suggestion in the past was we need to be online and we need to look like everyone else, because if we're not in this day and age, then we just look like we work for CSIS, which is what we're trying to stop people from knowing.
Right.
So the transition, that piece actually helped was quite sorry, what am I trying to say? Um, my experience from before on the online assets and things like that actually did help me with how I kind of started coming out online, and with profiles and trying different things and growing the network. So I did use some tactics that we had created into how to grow the network, how to reach out to folks, how to vet when you get an invite and someone starts chatting with you, sending you links, sending you documents, and wanting to get off the platform, wanting to go off to a different platform, those types of things. So I felt like even though I wasn't on the social networks, I felt prepared to go onto the social networks because of what I had been doing in the past. But being out there and having things out in the open, definitely a little bit more uncomfortable, and you have to think about it more. And you start seeing things adapting and threats growing, where voice cloning and deep fakes and all of that. So you start thinking, okay, well, I want to be out there, but how do I strike a balance of being out there and still protecting myself and my family, for example, or partners? And then you start thinking, well, someone can clone my voice, clone my face. What am I going to do? So then you start putting into place, different controls so that you protect your family and so on, because those things are going to happen. Yeah.
This has been a super interesting conversation. Would love to get your perspective though on my last question, which is, when it comes to cybersecurity, what keeps you up at night?
To me, I think the biggest piece is still, I would say, supply chain attacks. I think we haven't seen the end of that. I think it's quite dangerous, and it all goes into where we source all of our equipment, where we source all of our software and all of that. So recently there was in the U.S. the solar panels that came with essentially backdoors to China. I was, I'm like, I'm not surprised because we've technically had backdoors to China and the Chinese government on everything that we've purchased because every company has a piece or some tie to the Chinese government. So this isn't a new approach. There's also talk about new OSs that are going to be only Chinese government used or used in China from Huawei. And so that whole piece is quite interesting because unless we have full control of the whole supply chain, then the risk is always going to be there. And that comes in for cybersecurity and the physical security as well. There's many opportunities to be the man in the middle, to tap into, listen, influence, and so on. So I think to me is more of the, and I know I should mention AI, of course, because why not? There's also a supply and programming and training piece in there as to where your AI model comes from and what are the intentions of your AI model designers. So to me, that's still the biggest piece.
Well, Andrew, it's been super interesting talking to you. I think you bring a unique perspective. I mean, a lot of people in the cybersecurity world do not have a military background. They do not have an intelligence background. And so I think that your view on the landscape is super interesting. So I appreciate you spending time. If people want to find out more or connect with you, if you're okay with that, I know it's going to create a little bit of anxiety that you're out there. Where can they find you online?
So the easiest way is to go over to clavansecurity.com and hit contact, and it'll eventually come to me. One of my team members will forward that to me. If you want to connect through LinkedIn, go for it. Just the first message can't be trying to sell me something, but just say hi and let's connect. If anyone's based out of Ottawa, let's connect as well. We can have some coffee and chat as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to Code and Country.